Meet Errol Musk, the evil and sadistic father of Elon Musk. The father who tortured and physically abused Elon's mother for over a decade. The father who threatened to shoot Elon and his siblings in the knees, leaving their mother with 3 crippled children if she divorced him. The father who was accused of murdering 3 people but managed to escape all punishment. The same father who owned a yacht, a plane, 6 cars, an emerald mine, and said he had so much money that he couldn't close the safe, yet wouldn't buy Elon a computer. Sadly, this is only the beginning. We start our story in 1959 in South Africa. Elon's parents grew up as neighbors, so they knew each other practically their whole lives. But it was only later, when they became teenagers, that they started a romance and it blossomed into a true love. However, during their first year of university, May, Elon's mother, who you probably have seen many times with him at different red carpet events, finds out that Errol had been cheating on her with another woman. As you might expect, her anger boiled over, to the point where she decided she couldn't handle it anymore and ended her relationship with Errol then and there. That was not all. She has also decided to move 911.5 miles to another city, called Cape Town, to start over as far away from him as possible. The two had been apart for more than a year when Errol, completely out of the blue, flew to Cape Town, surprised May with an engagement ring, and promised he would change.
Oh my God.
Will you marry me?
But she wasn't buying it, and her answer was a firm
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Now, you might think the story ends here, but it doesn't. Despite May's resistance, Errol continued to propose to her for another 7 years, over and over, ignoring her rejections. But then he had a brilliant idea. The next time she turns him down, he will return home, where he would lie to May's parents and say that she agreed to marry him, as any self-respecting psychopath would do. Surprisingly, this worked. In the end, when faced with tremendous pressure from everyone around her, May felt that she had no other choice but to marry him. This decision was the beginning of a life filled with lies, abuse, and incredible twists and turns. Despite their unhappy marriage, the couple managed to have 3 kids, Elon, Tosca, and Kimball. In the eyes of the outside world, they seemed like a perfect, loving family. May was a successful dietitian and model, while Errol was a renowned engineer who was very successful handling large real estate projects. Most importantly, the kids were healthy, extremely smart, and looked genuinely happy. The Musks owned the biggest house in town, a yacht, 6 cars, and a plane. Basically, they were living the dream. Sadly, not long after this picture had been taken, when Elon was just 8 years old, the family broke apart. As it turns out, Errol has been abusing May all this time, physically, emotionally, and financially. The abuse began on their honeymoon years ago and never stopped.
My marriage was painful physically and mentally. When you are in that situation, first of all, you have no confidence. I think I was told 3 times a day that I'm ugly, stupid, and boring, and that's why we don't have friends. I can't be ugly. I won beauty competitions, and I can't be stupid because I have a Bachelor of Science degree, and maybe I'm boring, but I can't help it that I'm boring. Well, then he just beat me up. So then the more you object to what they say, the more you get beaten up. But this I never told him, is that if you hit the same spot, after the 3rd hit, you can't feel anything because your skin goes numb.
But she wasn't his only victim. Elon and his siblings have also experienced his rage. Having been abused for years, May wanted to divorce Errol, take the kids, and never see him again. However, the law in South Africa, a country filled with corruption and racism, would not allow a woman to divorce an abusive husband. This left May in an impossible situation. But that wasn't the most frightening part. When Earl understood she was done with him, he threatened to cut open her face with razor blades and shoot Elon, Kimball, and Tosca in the knees so that she would have 3 crippled children to raise. With no way out, May and the kids were living in absolute terror. Then, in 1979, an 11-page document came out, which finally allowed them to get out from this nightmare. And this has changed her and Elon's lives forever. Several years have passed, and Elon was about to make a decision that will change everything. When Elon was about 10 years old, he already devoured all the books available in the school and neighborhood libraries. And as any 10-year-old would have done, he began reading the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Not that I actually wanted to read the encyclopedia, but I ran out of things to read, so in desperation I read the encyclopedia.
This led to him to gain a new perspective on things. He was about to learn one of the most important lessons in his life. And it was this: your ability to deal with not knowing something is more important than anything you know. You see, during this time, Elon was unaware that his father had abused his mother. He really had no idea what kind of person his dad was. So after 2 years living with May, Elon felt sad for Earl. He was convinced that his dad was lonely, and since he was a really sweet and sensitive boy, he decided to move into his father's house and live there. Sadly, Elon didn't know what he was getting himself into. And so a new chapter has started in his life. From the outside, everything seemed to be going well for the newly reunited father and son. So it came as no surprise when Kimball, Elon's brother, joined him a few months later. With a gigantic house and plenty of money, the boys got anything they wanted from their dad. And the best part was, they got to often accompany Earl on his overseas adventures. You could say they were living the dream. However, the gruesome reality was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. In the same way Earl was abusing May, he was torturing his own children mentally and physically. During an interview he gave several years back, when he was already an adult, Elon couldn't stop himself from crying when answering questions about the time he spent with his father.
It was not a happy childhood. My father has serious issues.
Even though so many years have passed, it was evident the trauma this man endured was deeply ingrained in his mind and soul. To truly understand Earl, you have to listen to the one person who knows him best, his own mom. As Earl confesses, "My own mother told me I'm ruthless and that I should learn to be more humane." In spite of Elon's complicated life, one thing was very clear. He wanted to be an inventor since he was a child. And like many kids before him, he found a place that made him feel safe and helped him to escape his very unhappy everyday life: gaming. Video games inspired, challenged, and sparked the brilliant boy's imagination as he played them for hours on end. And when Elon told his father that he will become the best video game developer in the world one day, his father's malicious response will only leave him hurt and discouraged. Earl, who was clearly the best dad in the world, just laughed at him. As he was growing up, Elon started reading a lot about what was going on in the world, and that led him to the conclusion that if he wants to be at the heart of technology and innovation, he needs to be in America.
I remember thinking and saying that America is where great things are possible, more than any other country in the world. It's a little cliche, but it's true. America is the land of opportunity.
Elon became determined to leave South Africa. He longed for a place where he could pursue his dreams and finally be free. A place that was as far away from his abusive father as possible. Jumping ahead to Elon's 17th birthday, he was now practically an adult and decided to make his vision a reality by moving to the US. So, armed with only $2,000 and a dream, he left the only home he ever knew. And what did the world's #1 dad say to him as he was about to leave? Earl told him that he was an idiot, that he would fail, that he was never going to make it, and that he would be back to South Africa in 3 months. Earl could not have been more wrong. 3 years later, PayPal went public, and a few months after that, eBay bought it for $1.5 billion, making Elon, who co-founded the company and was the majority shareholder, a whopping $180 million richer. With all that money, he funded his 2 next companies, Tesla and SpaceX. At this point, Elon decided that he is now a grown man, and it's time to put the past behind him and make amends with his father. And so he moved Errol and his whole family, including his then wife and their children, as well as Jana, who will play a crucial role in our story, to the suburbs of Los Angeles so they could all be closer to him. Elon brought them a huge house, a number of cars, and even a boat. But unfortunately, he quickly realized that expecting his father to become a better man was a naive childhood fantasy, and that building a healthy relationship with him is virtually impossible. And the moral of the story is,
don't cast pearls before swine. And what that means is, if you're trying to help and it doesn't work, then stop helping.
it only made things worse. And the most ironic thing? It seems like every time Elon enjoys any success and achieves another major goal in his career, his critics and internet trolls bombard Twitter with claims that his father owned an emerald mine and that he used the money to fund his first startup. However, Elon succeeded despite his father, not because of him. Multiple times, Elon had discredited these claims, including tweeting that Errol never owned an emerald mine, that he didn't give him anything, and he paid for his own education, which landed deep into debt. As I've learned more about the history of this very complicated relationship, I understood why he doesn't want his father to get any credit for his accomplishments. After all, he suffered years of abuse. It appears that the mental abuse left the greatest mark on him. It even got to the point where Elon vowed his children would never meet Errol. "My dad will have a carefully thought out plan of evil," he says in a Rolling Stone interview. "He will plan evil. Almost every crime you can possibly think of, he has done. Almost every evil thing you could possibly think of, he has done. It's so terrible you can't believe it." Sadly, this isn't the end of the story, and things are going to get worse. January 2018, the mass production of the Tesla Model 3 is Elon Musk's most difficult challenge in his entire career. It even came to the point where the stress was so overwhelming that Elon started working 22-hour days and sleeping at the Tesla factory. In the midst of all this madness, Elon received shocking news from Allie, his half-sister, who told him their father had just had a child with his own stepdaughter, Jana. What the fuck?
Turns out Errol Musk fathered a child with his stepdaughter, who is 42 years younger than him and was just 4 years old when he married her mother.
Not surprisingly, the whole family, including Elon, was furious when they found out. They told Errol that he was deranged and had deep mental problems, but he couldn't care less. In fact, a few years later, in June 2022, Errol, who is now 76 years old, had yet another child with Jana. Despite Errol's horrific character, it's his actions that brought us to where we are today, telling a story of a family's courage and resilience in the face of adversity. So I would like to take this opportunity to give praise to May, Elon, Kimball, and Tosca, who, in spite of their father's horrible abuse, narcissistic behavior, and years of neglect, built a great life for themselves, full of light, and relentlessly pursued their passions while making the world a better place.